there, it's Nicole and welcome to the Waffle Flower channel. Today I've got some metallic Lacy Flowers cards to share with you. This is one of my favorite techniques, is using metallic watercolors to color on dark cardstock. It gives a really striking, beautiful effect. I'm using the Lacy Flowers stamp set. I'm going to use both the large and the small design from this stamp set. I've got some dark gray cardstock that I've trimmed down. It's 5.5 inches wide. It's going to be a little taller than what I'm going to need, but it's about 3.25 inches tall at this point. When I get to putting the card together, I'll trim it down a little more. What I'm going to do is, while I have my supplies out, I'll go ahead and create more than one card at a time. I'm using an anti-cling powder tool rather, so that when I get to embossing all of this, the embossing powder will stick just to the areas that has ink and not to anything else. Before I add any embossing powder to one of the images, the Versamark's going to stay wet for quite a while. So I like to go ahead and stamp the whole panel. In fact, I stamped 2 panels, both of the cards at one time. Then I'm going to sprinkle on some platinum embossing powder and emboss the images. This large kind of doily lacy flower shape is the star of the show for these cards. This is what's going to be so fun to color. When I do watercolor on dark cardstock, I like to look for a large image like this that's really going to be showy. And this is one that definitely fits the bill. I'm going to go ahead and fill in just this corner over here with a little bit of this large design. And then I'll fill in with the smaller flower in just a couple of places. And that'll fill in anything where there's some white space. Go ahead and clean my stamp real good, put that one away while I get the small one out. Again, I'm just reinforcing and using that powder tool each time to help make sure that when I add my embossing powder, it sticks only to the stamped areas. It's kind of important in a design like this. You don't want little flecks and flakes of embossing powder everywhere. I just used an acrylic block to stamp that last little one off the edge. This is some platinum embossing powder I'm going to sprinkle on. So it's going to be a very much tone-on-tone look with the dark gray cardstock and then the platinum embossing powder. You want to make sure that you get anything that's been stamped covered with the embossing powder. It creates a great little well that will hold the watercolor as well, so you don't have to worry quite so much about the watercolor migrating to other areas on the card. I like to hold mine up at an angle when I'm heat embossing so that I can really see what is heating up and what's embossed and what maybe needs me to hit it a little bit more. You would hate to get to the watercoloring portion only to find that your embossing powder might not be all the way heated up and embossed. So this is a great way, holding it at an angle, to make sure that the entire design is embossed really well. I'll do this for both panels. And then I'm going to take this Starry Colors watercolor palette. It's my favorite. I absolutely love it. Lots of beautiful shades in this. And I'm going to start watercoloring. The white gold is probably my favorite. I really think it's showy on any color of dark cardstock. Try black, dark gray like I'm using here, navy, browns even, if maybe you would emboss with some coppery color of embossing powder instead, I think would be stunning and would create some probably very fall or autumn looking cards. And what I'm going to do is just color these designs the same on all 3 cards. I like using a water brush pen. You could also use a paintbrush dipped in water, but it just picks up the color so nicely. I just kind of squeeze a little water from my water brush pen into each of these little wells to pick up the color, and then simply paint it on. And all of those embossed areas are like little wells that hold that color in place so easily. Once I get a couple more colors here, you'll really start to see the designs come to life. I'll go ahead and color these small ones just like, they almost look like the inside of the larger flower shape, the Lacy flower shape, which they are. So I'm going to color those exactly like the bigger ones. To clean my brush, I just squeeze out a little bit of that excess water into a paper towel and wipe the brush tip until it runs clear. The rose gold I am going to use next, and it's going to be probably the darkest color in this palette and really showy. I think it's important too, I tend to like to work small, work from the center out, instead of coloring the whole design or doing all the white at once, which would be fantastic if you could. But what happens is sometimes you might get two colors right next to each other and you didn't want to do that, or things just don't look right. So I tend to like to start small. Once I did one of the backgrounds, it was a lot easier. I switched back and forth at first, and then I went ahead and colored the whole thing of one of them and then went back and did the other one because I could use it kind of as a guide. You could do the same thing if you were doing more than 2 cards. You could go ahead and paint one and then go back and do all of the rest. I've sped this up quite a bit simply to kind of save time, but you can see the design starting to really take shape. Creating my own backgrounds is one of my favorite things to do, and as stampers, I think it's one of those things with all of our stamp sets, you can find a way to make a background with almost any stamp set that you have in your stash. It's just a really fun way to customize your backgrounds to perfectly match whatever occasion or kind of card that you're trying to make. The less water you add with the paint, the more opaque the paint will be. If you add quite a bit more water, it's going to be quite a bit more translucent. I tend to like mine to be pretty opaque, really fill in that whole thing with color. And just building my way out on all of these flowers. I will go and pull in a couple of different colors that I haven't used before as soon as I finish up with these 3 main ones, which I believe are the white gold, rose gold, and champagne. I'm going to pick a little bit different color after I do this outer large flower petal with that champagne color. I'm going to pick up some of those that look even more gold in color to do the rest of those little stripes around. So I'll do a real gold and then white for that. I'm going to go ahead and skip over to my other panel. This is where I was still trying to decide what to do on that one ring kind of in the middle of the flower. So I went ahead and colored in the other strip since I could use the first one as a guide. Here's that gold color. I'm just going to paint it in little stripes all the way around, kind of every other. Really, really quick. Now that this is the last thing there, it's much easier to go super fast. And then I'm just filling in with water for that last little area. And aren't those beautiful? I just love the look of these metallic watercolors on dark cardstock. The Lacy flower is perfect for this kind of technique. And if you want to do something a little bit more bright, you could definitely take and stamp this on white watercolor cardstock and color it in with just traditional watercolors for a really bright look that'll be completely different than these. With the metallics, they tend to look a lot more elegant, something great. I'm kind of thinking for wedding cards here. It's summertime, so these would make fantastic wedding cards. Now I've trimmed down my background. I think I'm going to have to trim it down just even a little bit more, but I'm going to use that strip as a guide to know where to stamp the phrase "From All of Us" from that Lacy Flowers stamp set. And I'm using the Misty so I can stamp it in the same place on both of my card fronts. This is a white side fold card base, so a traditional A2 sized card base. I'm going to use the anti-cling powder tool again. Stamp the greeting with Versamark ink, and this time emboss with gold embossing powder. That's going to match my die cut greeting. So just sprinkle that on. I'll grab the second card, do the same thing. If you are making more than two, you could totally do all of them at the same time here. And I'm just going to make sure that I get that embossed really well. And then do my second card. Just like the first, the Misty makes this so great to stamp it in the same place on each card. I've got several thin strips of black cardstock that I will be using to frame up the strips. Kind of helps ground that pattern strip on the card. And I'm just using a nice strong adhesive on the back of this because I watercolored on a regular cardstock paper. It does tend to kind of, the water makes the paper bow just a little bit. So I'm using some nice strong adhesive. The adhesive I usually use I was out of, so I was using some reinforcements, and this is a really sticky adhesive. It's great. Go ahead and attach this right to my card base, right underneath the "From All of Us" greeting. Put some adhesive on the back of the black cardstock strips. These are only about 1/8 of an inch wide, 5.5 inches long, so they frame up this strip. I think it helps keep the strip from looking like it's floating on the card. Just frames it up really nice. Make sure none of that adhesive is hanging over the edge. And these are trimmed from black cardstock. There's the first one. Go ahead and do my second one real quick. For my dimensional greeting that will finish off the card, I'll be using the Waffle Flower with Love die. That's this beautiful, small, scripty die. And I have a piece of gold foil cardstock that's adhered to Fun Foam with Stick It. It's a scrap from another project. I had used it previously, and I keep all of these because it works great for little things. And the With Love greeting works perfectly. I love the size of it. So I'm going to die cut that, and it's going to create a dimensional greeting. I'm going to carefully just peel this out. Since it's scripty, you want to be kind of careful that you don't tear it. It's really delicate. I'm using a piercing tool to remove any of those little inside pieces. And then I'm simply going to adhere that to my card right there at the end of the stamped and embossed greeting. It kind of overlays my pattern paper and finishes off that greeting perfectly. There is a teeny tiny little dot for the eye, and because it is cut from the Fun Foam, but it's so delicate, I went ahead and used a little dab of glossy accents to really make sure it stays put. I was so afraid that it would just kind of float or fall off of the card, so I went ahead and adhered that with glossy accents. The card can be finished right now if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and finish it with some Nouveau Crystal Drops in metallic colors. I think they match the watercolors perfectly. They add a nice, fun finishing touch. If you didn't want to do a scattering of dots, you could totally follow the outline of the stamped image and maybe insert some of them there, put them in the center of the flowers. Lots of ways to finish off these flowers. Thanks for joining me today for these metallic watercolored Lacy flower cards. For more information, please visit waffleflower.com. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas.